Hey folks, how you doing today? You ever feel like you walk into the parish and you look around and the place seems like it's on the decline or it's just kind of maintaining the status quo at best? What would it be like to walk in there and experience a parish on mission? Going to be talking to the author of the book Divine Renovation, moving from a maintenance parish to a missionary parish, Father James Mallon. Excited to chat with him a little bit, flying solo here today, but stick around and learn a little bit about the things that Divine Renovation Ministries are doing to help parishes move from maintenance to mission. See you in there. Hey folks, welcome back to the Catholic Coaching Podcast. I'm here without my better half at the moment, but I won't be by myself on this podcast. A couple months ago, I started reading a book called Divine Renovation, and it really changed my outlook, my perception of what is possible in the parish life. As a former DRE, I used to have the mindset, eventually as I left that ministry, that the parish was a place where good things go to die. Now, I now repent of that mindset, but a big part of the healing has been this book, Divine Renovation, and moving from a maintenance to a missional parish. Today, I've brought on the author of that book, and Father James Mallon. Very excited to have him on here. He's going to be sharing a little bit about the journey, about how he started to move from that maintenance to a missional parish, and share a little bit about Divine Renovation Ministries as well and how they are helping parishes do the same. A little bit about Father James. He's a parish priest right now, author of this book, Divine Renovation. He's also got a new book, Divine Renovation Beyond the Parish. Gets more to the diocesan level. He'll be sharing a little bit more about that. But founder of Divine Renovation Ministries, and really what their focus is connecting and equipping Catholic parishes around the world to become missional, to move out of this just maintaining the pie that we've gotten and actually growing, getting back to growing the pie and being evangelists here. How does that sound? The vision is that every Catholic parish in the world is missional and equipped to reach the unchurched and the de-churched. Interesting. Unchurched and the de-churched. Father James speaks, consults, and advises on behalf of the ministry. So excited to have you on here. Father James, welcome.
Matt, it's great to be with you. Thanks for taking the time to have this discussion.
You bet. You bet. I tell you what, when I first picked up the book and I started reading about your unique situation that you had, I don't know if this is right when you first started becoming pastor, or maybe it was your first time becoming pastor, but you had one of these amalgamation parishes. Can you share a little bit about what that first experience was like and how it was unique, but how you took advantage of that opportunity?
Yeah, so my own journey as a pastor leading missionary renewal came to a crescendo really when I became pastor at St. Benedict Parish, which was the result of three amalgamated parishes. But really my whole priesthood and the other parishes I was in, we had similar issues. We were always kind of trying to combine and join parishes together and wrestle with the question of infrastructure and how it relates to mission. Think about it. The infrastructure of most of our diocesan system was created to facilitate the mission of the church. But at some point that leveled off and the mission of the church was replaced by the call to maintain the structure. It was
Yes.
like the means became an end to itself. And really that's what we ended up doing in so many of our churches. So that's been a question that's haunted me for years. But then my first book, Divine Renovation, opens up with a story about Card Social, about a lady literally saying to me, we don't need to know more about Jesus. What we need is cards. People say, was that a true story? Did it really happen? Yes, it happened. Of course, it actually happened. I still remember it. And, it's an iconic story that basically raises questions about what's our fundamental purpose. Are our parishes, are they social clubs for members? The church's club, and that's a presumption that is present in many parishes. And what's the definition of a club? A club says that all this exists for us. The purpose is to meet our wants, not even necessarily our needs, but our wants. And that lady was quite determined, quite sure that what she wanted and maybe what she thought she needed was certainly not more of Jesus, but more cards. And I've run into this attitude in one way or another through the years in different parishes, where literally in every parish, when I've tried to kind of begin to change that focus, at some point or another, you get yelled at.
Hmm.
So but that's the we talk about missionary conversion, transformation, uh, and these kind of pastoral conversions that the church talks about, they don't happen by accident. They have
Hmm.
to be led,
Hmm.
and in like all conversions, it's a difficult one. So it means going from being an organization whose primary purpose is to serve its members, i.e., that's the definition of a club, whereas the church is called to be the church that goes out, the church that exists for others, the church that does not exist to serve its members. That's not its principal purpose. It's to go
Hmm.
out to make disciples to the lost, the least, and the last. Um, to be a church that leaves the 99. If you think about it, where the good shepherd leaves the 99 to go after the one that's lost, and any shepherd who's ever tried to do that, usually the 99 aren't very impressed by that. They usually get a little mad. They're usually like, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" I mean, this is the proverbial 99, because remember, in Canada, we've only got pre-COVID 8 and 92 lost sheep.
Hmm.
But you try leaving the 8 and they get pretty mad. They're quick to remind you who pays the bills around here. And
Hmm.
so this idea that we exist for a higher purpose than ourselves, even for our own spiritual needs or social needs, is so foreign. And so um, that's why the primary proposition in my first book was that the core crisis of our church is not, fill in the blank crisis. It's a crisis of identity, because mission is not just a posture. It's not just best practices. It's not just certain things that we do. It's primarily an identity. you know
Hmm.
and there's a very poor answer to your question, but it's a big question.
Yeah, yeah, and you say mission. It's an identity. It's something deeply personal, and you can see that even at parishes, they seem to take on this, a missionary charism that's particular to that parish. But then certainly, as the individuals, that you see that as well. And I know that you're big on the Clifton strengths as well, and I hear your number one is command, correct? Or did I
Actually,
get that
it's
wrong?
command is my number 4. So my
Okay, I
my
knew it
my,
was
my
somewhere up
Clifton
there.
strengths are very, very, very embarrassing. Now we could maybe let's tell you what, let's get to that in a minute, because I
Okay,
can say a
good,
lot
good.
about
Yeah,
that.
we'll embarrass you
But I
later.
just I just want to go back to the whole mission thing, because I mean, I would maintain that the vast majority of parishes are actually not missionary whatsoever.
Mm,
So, and the challenge of pastoral conversion um, is to make that turn, and and it's a very painful and difficult thing to undergo. I mean, in our experience in leading a parish in this, and also working with, thanks be to God, hundreds of parishes around the world, to really stop moving in the wrong direction and begin to start moving in the right direction takes between 2 to 4 years of hard work. That's just to start moving in the right direction. Two to
now
four
that
years.
seems very daunting. I mean, I imagine
It
that can
is
seem very
daunting. It's
daunting.
enormous. It's a
Yeah.
huge. It's the most challenging thing you'll ever do. It's difficult. It's painful. There's no quick fix in this kind of
Hmm.
conversion,
Hmm.
because mission is an identity. It has to be the identity has to be embraced and eventually become a posture. Because think of, if mission is to go out, if if the best of churches are a community, are we an inward focused community or an outward focused community?
Hmm.
And then that habit of going out, of being the church that goes out, that exists not for itself, has to be normalized. And that's when you start talking about a culture. And one
Hmm.
of the first challenges in phase 1 of renewal is to begin to get momentum on a missionary culture. Now, I want to go back and define my terms, because
Hmm.
the the original subtitle was propositional in the Canadian version of the book. It was from a maintenance to a missional parish, whereas the U.S. publishers decided that it would be more marketable if we called it moving your parish from maintenance to mission. It's more action. It's less theoretical. So that's
Hmm.
fair enough. But let's define these terms, because it's not maintenance or mission. This is important. And by maintenance, we don't mean maintaining buildings or things. That's a part of it. I mean primarily maintaining the flock. So think of the two tasks that Jesus gave the early church, to feed the sheep, and to catch fish, feed sheep and catch fish. He's, John 21 to Jesus to Peter, feed my lambs, feed my sheep.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus also said, put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch. Don't be afraid, from now on you will be fishers of men. So we're called to do both as a church, but we're a lot more comfortable with pastoring sheep. I mean, my canonical title as a priest is pastor. It's not fisher. I'm not Fisher James. My office is my role. I'm not appointed a fisherman of the parish, head fisherman. I'm appointed pastor, the shepherd. So we, that we're more, as a church, we're much more comfortable with tending the flock. But it's not either or. But here's the thing: if your primary sense of identity is caring for the flock, you'll never get to mission. The church will become inward focused because the needs of the flock are endless. And we just almost intensify the kind of unhealthy codependent model that exists in most of our parishes, whereby a small group of professionals, either ordained or not ordained, minister to a large group of mostly passive consumers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we get. We get consumption. We get religious consumerism. And religious consumerism is like any kind of consumer, has two basic values: convenience and lowest price. We all know the situation in parishes where people will shop around to find, what meets their preference. Either,
Mm-hmm.
they're something that they really like, or something that's convenient to them, or where the ask is the lowest. And that's what consumers want. And here's the thing: missionary disciples have preferences. Everyone has preferences. We all have preferences.
Mm-hmm.
A missionary disciple will be willing to say, okay, that wouldn't be my choice, but if it helps us to fill our mission to reach people on the outside, then I'm for it. I'm in support of it. Because
Mm-hmm.
churches that make mission primary will also do a pretty good job of caring for the sheep. Because
Yeah.
in mobilizing for mission, they mobilize the gifts of all the baptized, and that includes pastoring gifts as well, that can be mobilized to help the church be a more caring environment. Um, And so churches that make mission primary usually do maintenance well as well too. Churches that
Mm-hmm.
make maintenance primary never get round to mission. And I'll tell you why they never get round to mission: because there's so many demands on us. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Sunday, I don't know where you come from. Does Sunday happen once a week where you are? Is that
It
every
does.
week?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you guys have funerals? Do people die where you come from?
Sometimes, okay, on occasion.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
do you only have 24 hours? Is that the same where you come from? I mean,
Yeah.
we've got a finite
7 days.
amount of
7
time,
days
and
too. Yeah.
there are so many demands on us, and on things that need to be done, that ought to be done. And at the end of the day, it leaves very, very, very little time to actually put towards moving a parish in a missionary direction. And
Mm-hmm.
guess what? You're not going to be rewarded for it. You're not going to be cheered. As I said, the 99 are usually, when they actually feel the thing shift from them to the people who are not actually members, they're not going, most of them are not going to be too happy about it, and they'll let you know about it. So the system doesn't in itself doesn't reward that. So it's difficult. It takes time and effort. And so you've got to like really openly declare, like, we're moving in this direction. Because
Mm-hmm.
if your primary thing is we got to care for the sheep, you'll never get round to mission. Never, ever, ever.
Yeah.
And in doing so, we're actually living out what the church says about ourselves. I mean, read Evangelii Gaudium, Evangelii Nunciandi. I mean, it's quite plain that in our theological articulations and different documents, that we say this is mission, this is primary, but we rarely live it at the parish level.
Yeah. I'd love to get more into a little bit of the mindset behind it, Father, but something that stuck out to me from your book, and it has to do with somewhat with the mindset, but also this disposition of the priest is just going to take care of all of it, and I can just kind of sit back and be a consumer, so to speak. I'd never heard of clericalism described the way that you highlight it in the book, and you're drawing from Pope Francis in his words there, where there's the priest that clericalizes, but the laity that desires to be clericalized. Can you
Yes.
explain a little bit more about that and how that ties
Yeah,
into the maintenance
absolutely.
mindset?
Well, I'm called Father, and I'm not sure. Are you a father, Matt?
I am.
How many kids do you have?
I have one little girl. Her name's Avila.
And how old is Avila?
She's 4.
And I know that you and your wife delight in her as a 4-year-old, but I'm sure you also have a dream of when she grows up to be a young woman, to live out God's purpose for her life and be fully alive.
Oh yeah.
Those two things are not in tension with each other. Your desire for her maturity and fruitfulness as a person, and your love for her where she is as a 4-year-old. 4-year-olds usually act like 4-year-olds. If she still acts that way when she's 30-year-old, you might have a problem. So here's my point. We tolerate immaturity in the church. If we don't have immature church members, we stopped having spiritual children a long time ago. And so we've got to tolerate it. But in so many of our churches, we don't just tolerate it, we celebrate it and establish a culture of
Hmm.
immaturity,
Hmm.
because somehow it's almost like cute in some ways. And for some clergy, the mature laity who really truly believe in what the church teaches about co-responsibility for the mission. We're equally responsible, ordained, non-ordained. We have different roles, but there are some clergy who are threatened by that. And it's almost like a kind of ecclesiastical, um, what was that Greek mythological figure who, the Oedipal complex, right?
Oedipus.
The
Yeah.
the fear, Oedipus, so that the fear that somehow the child is going to rise up and supplant the father. And the
Hmm.
irony is, I'm called father, because here's the thing. St. Paul says in Colossians, "For this I labor, to present you all mature in Christ." The Greek word is telos, which means mature, complete. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the primary goal of pastoral care is the maturity of our parishioners, and yet we have a culture in many of our churches, a culture of immaturity,
Hmm.
uh, because therefore only these few professional people actually have maturity, and as a consequence of that, we somehow communicate the maturity is only for a few special people, such as the priest, the nun, or the paid religious person. And basically, for some, I think that is part of their identity, that they're somehow the guru. And
Hmm.
so rather than help working to help my child mature, and so that we step into the background and they grow and experience God's purpose for their lives, we so many in ministry in the church are content to be in the not in the background but in the foreground and receive the applause, because what generally happens in the clerical model is the, "Oh, Father, 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 you're so wonderful." So we seek affirmation from our people, and we will not challenge them to grow, and
Hmm.
will often try to cater to their needs. I mean, parents who do that with their kids, usually that's when social services show up.
Right.
And yet in the church we have this weird kind of codependent thing that kind of happens. So I believe that the definition, and thinking a lot in my first book about clericalism, that I settled on was the appropriate clericalism is the appropriation by the clerical caste of what is proper to the baptized. I've actually seen professional lay pastoral workers operate in a very clerical mode.
Hmm.
So it's basically says that what baptism is actually meant to be for every Christian is actually only attainable by a few professionals,
Hmm.
and the rest are just you. There's almost like a second class way of being a follower of Jesus, and most of that is quite passive,
Right. That
and you
proper to the
receive ministry. Yeah.
right. That proper to the baptized, and I mean, you throw all the administrative runnings of the church that are in there, uh, and who's ultimately now responsible for that? It just falls on the shoulders of these priests. And up where I was previously before coming down to Ave Maria, I was in the Diocese of Albany, and they've got upwards of 120 something parishes with down to 50 something odd priests now. And it was our first day back up north visiting some family. And our pastor comes out and he says, "Listen, we're going to be merging some of the masses, all right? Only one mass between these three churches, which are like in 5 square miles of one another, right? And only one mass is going to be celebrated on Saturday amongst these three churches. And it's just become too much of an administrative burden. It's really the administrative burden on the pastors that's bringing this about." And the first thought I had is, why are the pastors the only ones bearing this administrative burden? There are so many people amongst the flock that we don't necessarily even have to pay them. We just need to create an opportunity for them to do what they do
Yeah,
best and create
we're
a
reaping what
space.
we've sowed of a particular theology and understanding of priestly ministry and of the role of the baptized. And so this is what the Second Vatican Council, I mean, some of the central insights of the council were about. They attacked these very things. But it's like anything, the insights and impact of any ecumenical council sometimes take a century or more before
Mhm.
they impact at the local level. It's the whole thing of momentum. I've often thought about this at the parish level. Every living system has momentum. It's moving in one direction or another.
Mhm.
We called the book, From Maintenance to Mission, but sadly, most of our parishes in North America and the Western world are not doing maintenance. They're in decline. They're not maintaining the flock. They're losing the flock. The flock are shrinking. They're getting older. They're getting picked off by wolves. Like the flock is dying.
Mhm.
And so, if you are maintaining the flock, congratulations. That's amazing.
Mhm.
Um, some places look like they're maintaining the flock, but really, because of first generation migration of people into the area, uh, the pews are still relatively the same
It's a
as they were
shuffling
before.
of
But really,
numbers. Yeah.
well, what it's like someone who's hemorrhaging, going through massive hemorrhaging, but getting simultaneous blood transfusions. I mean, that's
Mhm.
the cheeks may still be rosy, but that the heart might be pumping, but that's not health. And so, are we maintaining the flock? Most churches are not maintaining the flock. So obviously, we need to change. We need to change the
Mhm.
trajectory. But every system has momentum. Think of the image of the Titanic. Remember the movie Titanic when they saw the iceberg, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So they saw the iceberg. And they're like, I forget what they said in the movie, but blimey, I think they said, blimey, and they picked up the phone. And what they did, two things. Well, they sounded the alarm, and then they turned the wheel and they reversed engines. I mean, that's pretty fast action. They turned the wheel and reversed engines, and what happened?
They sank.
Nothing. No, it kept. Well, it kept.
Oh, I see what you're
They,
saying.
they made
Yes.
these changes, but the ship kept moving.
Kept going.
Nothing. But ever so slowly, it started to slow down, and then it started to turn. Like the church is a big ship. The parish is
Mhm.
a big ship. Like you can reverse engines and turn the wheel, and guess what happens for the next year or two? You still head in the same direction,
Well,
and
Father, how do you do it
sometimes.
without capsizing? I mean, like I think that's kind of the big fear of like, okay, making this shift that we're talking about. There's a fear that if I turn that helm a little bit, like we're just going to capsize and we're going to go under.
Well, yeah, this is a brilliant question. I mean, because here's the thing: anyone can wreck a can anyone can split the ship in two. Anyone can divide a parish, and so it's the whole thing of getting critical mass of people. And this is what our ministry, this is what Divine Renovation Ministry does. This is what we
Mm.
coach through. I mean, to let's be clear, to make that turn into full out missional mode, we believe takes 6 to 8 years. Uh, the If you wrench the wheel, I mean, if in a parish you turn the wheel 180 degrees or 90 degrees and reversed engines, you would destroy your parish. Don't recommend you do that.
Got it.
it's
Didn't
it
didn't
takes
work for the
time.
Titanic either. Yeah.
Yes, it did. Yeah, even that didn't work for the Titanic, but it take, like I said, that 2 years to stop moving in the wrong direction and begin to move in the right direction. I mean, that for people, that's like, what? That's horrible. It's like, yeah, it it's an organic system. It's a big ship. I mean, there's a lot we could say about this, but I often speak about three distinct phases of parish renewal. And phase one, the primary goal is to get a critical mass of people who are on board with the vision. In
Hmm.
the language of Gallup, I know your listeners may be familiar. The sense of engagement, because engagement, one of the biggest mistakes one of the biggest misunderstandings with that term in church circles is people think of engagement as involvement, but we know that that's not how Gallup defines
Right.
engagement. Engagement means buy-in. So it's buy-in with the vision, with where we're going, where we're headed. And so one of the first tasks as you go into a parish is you've got to stir up a desire to move in a different direction.
Hmm.
You've got to you know unveil you know unveil the reality, to drive home where are we headed. If we
Hmm.
keep going where we're going,
Hmm.
what's going to happen? But you can't do it in a way that somehow points blame at the people who came before you, as if all previous shepherds were thieves and robbers and you're the good shepherd. Nor can you do it in a way that produces despair in people. You've got to somehow do it in a spirit of hope. So, and then we can't keep going in this direction and then begin to teach and preach about where we're called to go. And so, casting vision, forming vision, communicating vision, casting vision, letting it grow and be discussed. And again, that takes several years to get a critical mass of about 40%.
Mm-hmm.
Once you hit the 40% mass of parishioners who actually are really on board with where you're going, then the scales shift. Something inherently shifts. So there's preaching, teaching, meeting with people, sitting down with people, sharing your heart, getting teams together, having gatherings where you speak about this. And one of the main things you can do in that first phase is start doing evangelization, something like Alpha.
Mm-hmm.
You remember, Scripture says, basically, think of two passages in Scripture: "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God." So listen up. And then another invitation in the Scriptures is taste and see.
Mm.
It's not just listen up. Like, you can preach all you want and tell people to listen up and give them beautiful teaching and preaching about the importance of A, B, C, D, and E. You're only going to impact a small percentage of parishioners. That was my approach in the past. I just thought, if I just preached this stuff and served up the good spiritual food, we would change everything. No. Hey, it's when they taste and see, then they know the Lord is good. And then it's like, oh, okay, I could never have, you could have given a million homilies, I never would have gotten it. It was only when I tasted that I realized what it was. And that, mobilization of people to actually engage in evangelization, when people themselves are being evangelized, brought deeper into relationship with Jesus, experiencing spiritual community for often the first time in their lives, and seeing unchurched people come to Jesus and come to faith, and then come to the sacraments and come into
Mm-hmm.
the church.
Mm-hmm.
That's mind-blowing for people. So that's
Uh,
some of the things you do in the first year. John Ortberg, a Protestant pastor, he defined leadership. It's one of my favorite definitions of leadership. He said leadership is disappointing your people at a rate they can accept. And what that rate is needs to be carefully discerned. This is why we also teach in our ministry that we
mm-hmm.
help pastors to form leadership teams, so they're not alone, because you can't do something like this alone. But it's that
Yeah.
art of what is too much. Like, how do you turn the ship without capsizing? It's the question.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think at my time I was in the Marine Corps, and we would did some time in Afghanistan and counterinsurgency. And one of the things that they said is you don't go in there and just lay down the law. You win the early battles first, or else there's going to be nobody there to mourn your defeat.
Mhm.
Is the way that they would say it.
Mhm.
So yes, building out those core teams is huge. And Father, I think there might even be some people that are listening here that are, hearing you, and they're just like, oh man, I wish it'd be nice if we had a priest that was at the helm of our parish, that was as determined and strong-willed and high in that command presence as Father James here. But we don't really have that, so I don't see how this is ever going to work at our parish. How do you respond to that
Yeah.
mindset?
It's a very interesting observation. At Divine Renovation Ministry, we use Gallup's transfinders. So we use transfinders with our pastors and leadership teams to help them, understand how they're, in a sense, hardwired, whether it's through the way God has made them, or the way God has shaped them, or the way their environments have shaped them, whatever it is. And to help form teams and help teams to function properly. And we also use APEST. So the focus on Ephesians 4, apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher. We find that the two work quite well together. One is kind of your natural giftings, and grace built on nature. So the other is looking more at spiritual giftings as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a temptation to say, well, it's only this profile that can really this kind of change,
Mm-hmm.
lead this kind of change. And I would say, no, that's not true. I don't believe it's true at all, because guess what? By myself, I'm not that good. So my number one. Okay, so when I did my Clifton's Transfinder, I was absolutely mortified. I was embarrassed, and they made us. I was in this workshop. They made us wear them on our name tags, and I was absolutely humiliated. And people would come up and read it and say, "Oh, that explains it." So my number, because the first four of my top
Weaponizing
five.
strengths.
Well, my fifth one is connectedness, which is lovely. But my first four were what I considered to be my character defects. So here's my character defects. I'm being told that
I
these are
can't
my
wait for
gifts.
this.
So number one is competition. Number two is what is it? Hang on, I got it up here.
Looking up
Number
at the
two
wall.
is I can't read it. But Paul, can you bring that? Can you pull that down? No, number two is
Is
I
it a
was going to grab it.
relationship or is it an execution?
No,
You're
they're all crazy ones. So yeah, so here's achiever. I can never remember if it's achiever activator. So achiever is number
uh-huh.
2.
Yeah.
Number 3 is activator, and number 4 is command. So basically, I'm competitive, ambitious, impatient, and bossy.
In the
And
shadow
people are like,
side.
yeah, that on the shadow side. So it's competition. How do I experience that? So I get bored if there's no one around me doing something better, and I kind of get bored. I lose interest when I see people kicking my butt on something. I'm like, that
Yeah.
is awesome. I'm
You're like
so
Seabiscuit.
inspired. Oh man, I'm just so inspired to strive for, because it's not so much I want to win, although sometimes it is. But anyway, it's more like, oh, I didn't know that was possible. Isn't that incredible? Let's
Well, I
go
think of
there.
you
And
think of the guys that are how many people broke the 4 minute mile or something as soon as one guy broke it, right? And all of a sudden,
that's
boom, they
it.
just see that it can be done, and next thing you know,
Well,
they're pursuing excellence.
it's like I think sometimes we don't know what a healthy parish looks like because we just compare ourselves to each other.
Hmm.
And so when you see excellence, I find that incredibly inspiring, and it inspires me. Achiever is, well, many of your listeners have achiever. It just means you're willing, if you're passionate about something, you're willing to work your butt off. And
Hmm.
activator is like, well, look, we got an idea. Let's figure it out as we go along. I'm not gonna, if you got to plan everything out, it drives me crazy. Let's just
Hmm.
let's just do it. Let's just
Let's go.
get things going. And I'm good at starting things up and getting things going. And command is kind of embarrassing, but it's kind of one of those things. I'm the guy in the small group when you get together and there's no leader and everyone's looking at each other. And if no one takes charge after 5 seconds, I will. I'm the guy. I'll take
Uh huh.
charge. I can't help. I can't help
Decisiveness.
it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's I've had to learn, how do I used to think these things were character flaws and used to fight against them. So here I've got this Gallup thing telling me that no, these are neutral in a sense, and God can use them if you can bring balance to yourself. So I learned very quickly that two things: that if I'm to lean in instead of leaning away from these traits, which I did for years, if I actually lean into them, that could be pretty scary.
Mm.
If I don't have people around me who can bring balance to me and point out my blind spots, and that's in a sense what I learned to do, very painfully, because with these kind of traits, like, so what do I do? So this profile, by myself, what do? I drive myself and everyone around me to go faster and faster and faster and faster until everything explodes and there's body parts all over the ground. That's my profile. Is that successful? No.
Mm.
So if I was a car, I'm a big gas pedal and you're looking to find where the brake is. I got a steering wheel, but there's no brake. And who wants to go who wants to go on a drive with a guy like that, right? So here's the thing. Well, you can say, well, what about someone who's got a profile there are people who are big breaks and are never going to get anything done. Here's the bottom line. I don't believe there's any profile that will get you to the finish line alone,
Mm.
because there's no
Isn't
such
that
thing as a
wonderful?
balanced person. There's no balanced person. We need each other. We
Yeah.
need to bring a team around ourselves, because guess what? A car needs a gas pedal, it needs a brake, it needs a chassis, it needs an engine, and it needs a steering wheel. When one of those things are gone, you're not going to make it across the finish line. So there is no profile. And I'll tell you this: in
Mm.
talking with
Hmm.
not just some Gallup folks, but also our friends with APEST, and talking with those guys, because it's the same thing. Like APEST, the apostolic charism is the kind of innovative, entrepreneurial spirit that's driving forward, and evangelistic. And you would think that the priests in a that might be inclined to take up the cause for parish renewal are going to be more apostolic and
Hmm.
evangelistically minded. And those are often the early adopters. They're the ones who will first put up their hands and say, I want to do this. But they're sometimes also the guys who will capsize the ship.
Mm. Hmm.
Because if you don't have someone with a high pastoring or relationship gifting to come alongside, the people like me often can be blind or not overly concerned about people that might be getting excluded, or how people might be getting impacted.
Hmm.
That's not a good thing. That's actually pretty bad if you want to keep the thing from sinking. So you no one of these giftings is the key. And here's what they'll say: the key is humility and being open to embrace the fact that no profile has everything that you need. We need to work together in a humble way, in which there's vulnerability and trust, and that we're rowing together in the same direction. And what the key is, the humility to learn and work with others. And some of the long-term examples of pastoral renewal is actually with people who have profiles that are highly relational.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. I mean, you get guys with we've worked with priests who have, empathy is their number one, and consistency, and includer. So you get your first three are empathy, consistency, includer, and you're going to lead pastoral conversion where people are going to get mad at you and people are going to feel excluded, and you have to treat different people in different ways. It's like you see some guys' heads beginning to explode, because it just goes against how they're hardwired with their gifting. But yet, if guys with these giftings can again humble themselves and bring people alongside who can help bring balance so the thing can move forward, long term, some of the highly relational giftings can have a higher success rate because they're the glue that holds it all together.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is humility and allowing other people to come alongside you and to share their gifts and impact you as a leader with their particular gift sets.
They can build those teams really well. My wife and I, we recently spent a lot of time in our Metanoia Catholic Academy on teaching about the temperaments, and that phlegmatic temperament is one that you often see. And not that there's necessarily a direct correlation between the Gallup strengths and your different temperaments, but that temperament that the phlegmatic temperament, we find a lot of those relationship themes very common there. And that phlegmatic temperament is very steadfast. And in fact, it's actually a very common temperament. You would think that it would be choleric, this really CEO type that would be the military leaders. Actually, you have a lot of military leaders that are phlegmatic. They're very constant. They're very emotionally stable. And they can make incredible teams with those relationship skills. So I can hear kind of that longevity, where it's not just you're riding on the fumes of my influence or fuel that's driving this ship, but rather you just surround yourself with these people that, you're operating as a body in the body of Christ at this point. So you get these parishes, you start to get these parishes on board, Father, and work with these priests who, this is my connectedness showing up, and I know your high connectedness too. You probably think, just think how serendipitous that God gives the church what she needs when she needs it. God gives parishes the leaders that she needs. And so I imagine that if we go into this with this assumption that every parish has the same set of needs, we presume that every parish is made up of the same set of people, and they're not. And so I share this to kind of echo what you're saying. Yeah, it doesn't matter what your gifts are, or what your strengths are, or your charisms are. The Lord has put you there. His grace is sufficient. The talents He's given you are sufficient, and there's support in the wings. How have you started to help these pastors then draw in support? Sure. Maybe they're used to being, I've got my set of 4 volunteers, and oh, by the way, I'm discovering that they're actually in the actively disengaged bucket over here. They're actually the ones that are there a lot of the times, perhaps protecting their job, protecting the way things have always been done. The ones say, well, we've never done it that way, but they're the ones that I have consistently. How do you start to build some of these teams and draw in some more untapped talent, perhaps, in the parishes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question. I mean, I've just come into a parish 2 years ago, and during the pandemic, after they pulled the trigger on a merger of 4 dying communities, 14 buildings in a 3-kilometer radius. It's like insane. Like, biggest challenge of my life dealing with this, and again, very no clear vision before, no real commitment to evangelization or discipleship or anything like that. So I think the start is just, the first year or two is speaking a lot about vision, about direction, about the future. Again, that whole, preaching the meta narrative, but where are we going? How are we going to get, where are we called to go? Where are we presently going, and where will we be if we keep going in that direction? Like, you've got to begin to pry open these topics and preach into them on weekends. Make sure that there's a consistent homily being given across all your masses on the weekend. Utilize different means of communication. I used to say to people, go for coffee, to say to pastors, identify your key people in your parish. Who are the key influencers, whether they have a role presently or not? Go sit down with them and open your heart to them. Honor them for their contribution to the parish, and listen to them, but share your own heart as well, and build trust. Don't just roll in there like a steamroller. One of the challenges I had coming into this parish was, it was during COVID. Coffee shops were closed. We couldn't meet. I was like, what am I going to do? How do I begin to break ground like this the way I used to when I go for coffee? So we come up with an idea of creating a weekly video we call Coffee with Father James, where I sit and have a cup of coffee and just talk. It's not scripted. It's more from the heart. It's a bit risky, but for the most part, it's worked, and people have responded well, and we've kept it going, even though the coffee shops are open. So it's just, again, usually they're sometimes we get caught in the weeds a little bit, but we try to keep it big picture, kind of vision, in talking about the direction. And then one of the first things you often have to do is you're wrestling with staff, because you inherit staff when you come into a parish, and some staff are not, they're not going to be excited about this new direction, but it takes time. And even if you've identified staff who are like, maybe begin to push back, and you sense that they're not on board with it, you can't just say, okay, you're gone. You've got to invest. You've got to give them a chance. You got to bring them to our conference, see if they catch it, because they might just catch it. But if they don't, at some point there comes a decision about, is this where you should be? Because you've got to build out from your core, and if you want to move a parish in a direction, having a parish staff that actually share the vision and are committed to rowing in the same direction, absolutely essential. Again, this takes time. This is some of the stuff you're going to do in the first couple of years. Begin to do evangelization, begin to utilize a program like Alpha, begin to celebrate stories of conversion, have testimonies, and then you'll see, like, there will be a lot of Catholics in the parish will take an allergic reaction to it. Like, everywhere I've ever gone as a parish, when you start actually talking about evangelization and doing it, people start breaking out in hives. A lot of people start freaking out. Like, we're Catholics, we don't do that. What are you talking about? All this talk about Jesus, and literally, I could tell you story after story of things that have happened in different parishes with people pushing back. It's almost like a bit of a spiritual stronghold that you need to break open. And so all of these things begin to happen as you begin to, change the tone of preaching, grow your hospitality on weekends and such. People begin to feel the change in the air. And some people, as they say, renewal happens by addition and attrition. Some people are going to leave, and some people will join. The key is that they don't all leave at once. That's called capsizing the ship, when everyone leaves at once. That would be bad. But you can't stop people people will leave. Like, as soon as you begin to move beyond this, baseline consumer experience of religion light, of Catholic light, the people who are simple, who don't want to be bothered with anything beyond their convenient mass time, they're going to start getting irritated with you, that you start talking about that somehow there's more. And so it's inevitable that some people are going to get upset and leave. But so that's a kind of a starting place. Like, that's your real place in the first couple of years. And then put a leadership team together, form a pastoral council that's on board with the vision, not just one that you build from an election process, which ends up to be like a House of Representatives and has distrusting written into its very DNA.
Lobbying
and you've got
Yeah.
politicking and lobbying and the loyal opposition, and a church is never going to mobilize for mission with that kind of structure.
Yeah. Something that as again, entering into the minds of our listeners, Father, you're talking about evangelizing, and I even jump back into my own shoes when I was a DRE, and I'm thinking to myself, wait, you're going to add something new to my plate? Like, I'm already I've already got the religious education programs that are going from K through 12. I've got the RCIA. We've got marriage preparation over here, like the young adult ministry. You want to add something new to my plate? Isn't that enough? And I think about how you approached even the current paradigm even the structure of the ministries within the parish. Uh, and you address it in your book. And in some ways, Father, you kind of blew it up. And I mean, that might be a bit of a violent way of looking at it, but you just said, okay, let's even take a look at what we're currently doing. And you really made some shifts in the way that you
Yeah,
still met those needs,
yeah, we did
but
blow it
did it
up, but I mean,
differently.
we 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 spent a year talking about the big vision, and then
Mm-hmm.
took time to talk about what was not working with the program, and the fact that we were going to blow it up, and when we were not just when we were going to blow it up, but and how, but we talked about why,
Mm-hmm.
and then we told people we were going to do it again, and then we did it, and there was still lots of angry people, but it paid off. The point is, our whole system is built on presumptions of Christendom, that we have a Christian Catholic culture, and so catechesis and sacramental prep were reign supreme. And all of the teachings of the church tell us that the Catechism of the Catholic Church itself says that evangelization and conversion must precede sacraments and liturgy. And we've got
Mm.
all these other statements that talk about the primacy. Evangelization comes first. The 1984 address by Pope John Paul II to the Congregation of Clergy, which was introduced into this document that came out 2 years ago on the pastoral conversion of the parish for the sake of the missionary vocation. It's a long title. It says that evangelization is primary, uh, preeminent, and preferential. Now, we could take time to unpack the meaning of those three
Mm-hmm.
words, but
Mm-hmm.
think of a think of your average parish. Is evangelization primary? No. Is it preeminent? No. Is it preferential? Most certainly not. We're almost embarrassed about it. It's run as a program amidst other programs,
Even that
and it ends up.
definition, though, of evangelization, Father, is I think there might be some people saying, I'm evangelizing through my catechesis program. Can you define when you say evangelization for like what are we talking about here? A good
Yeah, and
definition.
so you might be evangelization through your catechesis program, but the catechesis is still catechesis. All catechesis should be evangelistic, but it's catechesis. The word catechesis comes from a Greek word katechane. Uh, the word echo, it comes from that because it means to sound out. When you stand at a mouth of a cave and you say hello, you'll hear your voice return to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they get the word catechetics, is that you're you're teaching, you're speaking in, and you're going to hear it back. That's catechesis. What if there's no cave? So it's like, oh, because catechesis ultimately is information about, uh, that should deepen your love for Jesus.
Mm.
But it's the whole thing. It's like we're teaching people about a person that most people have never met. They've just heard about
Mm.
him. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's many of us have experienced that. How often do you hear testimonies? I grew up in the Catholic Church, but
Yeah, I was an
same
altar
was
boy.
for me.
Yeah.
I went to church my whole life, and I didn't know a personal relationship with Jesus was possible. And I hated
That
Sunday
sounds very
school. I hated
Protestant.
hated catechesis. But once I met Jesus, then I couldn't get enough. I was
Mm.
hungry for more. So what do? We do teaching and sacraments. We make them of primary importance. And I think that goes down to the way that the Great Commission of Jesus has been understood for centuries, and from the time
Mm-hmm.
of the fifth century rather. Saint Jerome translated Matthew 28, the Great Commission: go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them and teaching them. It's very interesting that those four distinct verbs, and the central verb is the task to make disciples, mathetusite in Greek. In Jerome's translation, he translates make disciples of all nations. He translates it as teach all nations. And then baptize them and teach them some more. So it's docite
Mm.
docentes in Latin, whereas in the Greek it's mathetusite and didaskontes in Greek. The word for
Lexicon.
teaching.
Yes. Or
So basically, the original Greek says, "Go, make disciples, baptize them, and teach." And Saint Jerome's translation says, "Go, teach all nations, baptize them, and teach them again." So
mm.
go, teach, baptize, teach. Well, what do we do in the church? We go and we teach and we baptize and we teach. We go, we do catechesis, we do sacraments, and we do more catechesis. Catechesis, sacraments, catechesis, sacraments. What do we do? What do we not do? Evangelization. We don't make disciples. A disciple is a student, a learner, someone who's become capable of learning. And so remember that St. Jerome's translation ruled supreme for 14 for 1,500 years in the church. In fact, it wasn't until like the late 60s in modern translations that rendering of mathetousetai was changed to mean make disciples.
Mm.
Even influenced the early translations of English Bibles. If you go to the Douay-Rheims Bible, it's translated teach all nations. If you even go to the King James Bible, the original King James Bible, teach all nations. So this idea that it's about information is deep seated and not only that, we've corrected our biblical translations, but our liturgical texts still say go teach all nations. You look at the prayer of blessing of water for the rite of baptism. Lord Jesus, you commanded your disciples to go forth and teach all nations. So all you need to do is teach. And so why do we do what we do at the parish level? Because deep down we believe it's what we're supposed to do. And the
Mm.
one thing that the church tells us will render all of our efforts fruitless, i.e., not properly evangelizing and making disciples, is the one thing we're still not good at. And so what do? We gravitate to what we're comfortable with and what we're familiar with and what we
Mm.
and we keep doing
Mm.
it even though it's not bearing fruit.
I imagine even to understand that my role is not to teach, but my role is to make disciples. There's a completely different mindset and how we approach. And for those people that are listening, Father James, I loved how practical you got in this book in terms of some of the ways. If you want to hear a little bit more about literally the structure of the new programs that he rolled out as pastor, you can read a little bit more about that in Divine Renovation. Kind of as we're wrapping up here, Father, I know I'm going to appeal to your activator a little bit here, and for all those people that are listening, maybe they're part of one of these parishes that is not even in maintenance mode right now. It's declining. And what is the appeal? Like, what's the first step, the practical step that somebody might take to start to turn the wheel of that ship a little bit?
Well, obviously it depends on who you are. I mean, in our model of working with parishes, through our experience and even our theology, unless the pastor is on board with this, it's never going to happen. I mean, it's hard enough when the pastor is on board and passionate about it. It's difficult enough. But if the pastor is not on board, if he's not really on fire with this and willing to go, it's going to be virtually impossible. So, in my most recent book, or the book from 2 years ago, I wrote a little bit about how to lead when you're not in charge. How you can actually maybe influence dimensions of the life of your parish when you're not in the leadership role. But it is difficult to do it without it. If you think your pastor might be open to it, go and have a discussion with them. Read the book, get the book. Our ministry exists to inspire, equip, and connect parishes to move their parishes from maintenance to mission, so that people can come to know Jesus as Lord, can come into the church, so we can mobilize the church for mission. I wrote the book. The book was published in August 2014, so 8 years ago it was published, and the response to it was huge, which led us to have a conference in Halifax in 2016 that we didn't know anyone would even wondered if people would show up, and we had over 600 people come from 14 countries. And from there we launched a ministry. We started with one person, one full-time position, and a few people in a basement room, and 6 years later we now have, I think, 48 staff around the world and about 34 contract coaches, and we're working. I was talking to our president just the other day. I think he said 75 countries we have a presence in, and we're actively coaching. I think this past year we coached about 500 pastors in 34 different countries and 7 different languages. So it's crazy. And one of the big shifts we have video resource. We have online events that happen all the time, conferences, books. We just released a book on missionary preaching, which was written by a group of priests that are central to our ministry. Amazing book. So we produce resources like that, and then our coaching. We have group cohort coaching for pastors, and then one-on-one coaching. Now, here's a big shift we made early on in our ministry. We had no funding, so we charge fees, and later we discerned to take the step to not charge fees anymore. So basically, we're a donor-funded ministry. So, and it was scary. It's a scary step to go donor-funded, because it's like, it's risky. It's very scary. So we're donor-funded. So it basically meant that we were able to move. A couple of things happened. we no longer felt like we're selling in it. We're not selling, we're serving. That was very liberating.
Mm.
And the other thing is that we were so hard up previously for funds that we would, in a sense, work with anyone who wanted to work with us. Anyone who could write a check, we'd say, okay, even if we didn't think there was much hope. Whereas now we're donor funded, so we're just saying we're careful who we work with, because every investment in a particular parish costs us, and we've got to go and try to find the funds for it. So we want to work with people who are actually serious and passionate about this.
Yeah.
And so touch base with the ministry, go on our website, and there's a ton of resources. There's, just the last couple of weeks, we had events in New Zealand, online events in Australia. We did an event in Germany just a couple of weeks ago. We did a U.S. conference in Dallas back in sometime in the summer. We've got an event in Scotland, I think, happened. There was a few other countries where there's stuff happening all over the world. And here's the really cool thing. They're not talking about, I was told by the president last week, he said, Father James, there's a whole bunch of priests involved in our ministry now who don't even know who you are. They've never even heard your name. And it's like, that's awesome. So
Level 5 leadership.
Because they're the guys on webinars and the testimonies and the stories, they're not from St. Benedict Parish anymore. They're from parishes in Australia and Portugal and Montreal, Canada, and different places in the US and South Africa and all these other countries. And that's awesome. So if you want to get connected and learn more about our ministry, just go onto our website, divinerenovation.org.
Fantastic. My little girl just walked in here. So life working at home. Avila, you want to say hi to Father James? Okay. There you go.
Hey, Avila. How are you? You have a beautiful name. Yeah, lovely name. Good to meet you.
You have a beautiful name and a lovely name. Thanks for making a little cameo here. Well, Father, I think it's amazing in the work, and I know that what we do as coaches also is it's different from just passively taking in information. There's some people that may be able to pick this up and really run with the book. But discipleship doesn't really work that way. And that's really kind of where a group like yours comes in, that's doing the actual coaching, that are helping people to get in touch with their own experience as they're going through this transformation. To me, even a student of the experience as they're going through this, because it's a growth in holiness here too.
And here's the thing, Divine Renovation is not a program. I bristle when I hear that. It's not a program. It's programmatic, but it's not a program. It's a set of particular values. And we have 3 keys: primacy of power of the Holy Spirit, primacy of evangelization, the best of leadership. The key ring represents the Eucharist. So we have key principles that have to be contextualized, and everyone's context is different. Everyone's starting point is different. And so it's like getting fit, right? Do you have to join a gym to get in shape? No, you don't. Some people can do it all by themselves in their basement. A lot of people, the turning point for them is getting a membership, and that can help them to get in shape. And some people, they get a personal trainer, like the really, really serious people who are playing at a high level will get a personal trainer. And so it's like that. It's like we've got resources that you can engage. We don't even know who you are. And then you're doing it basically at home by yourself. And we meet people like this all the time at conferences. They're like, yeah, we've been doing this for 4 years and amazing things are happening. It's like, we've never heard of you. Yeah. It's wonderful. It's great when that happens. And then there's people who are engaging different they've joined the gym and they're on different machines, and some are doing well, some not so well. And then there's people who have personal trainers. And so we get people at all these different levels. Yeah. And we have an internal pipeline, like all of our coaches were people who were coached. So one of our key values is from the trenches. So every single one of our coaches either were or are practitioners. And I think this is so important because there's one essential thing that is learned through being in the trenches with parish renewal that you're never going to learn from a book. And it's how difficult this is and how much time it takes. That's the deal breaker, to really learn that this is, to do this, lead this, you got to be in for the long haul.
I'll tell you what, Father, I want to go another hour, but we're not going to. I want to hear a lot more about just what it's like in the trenches, the experience of your coaches in the trenches working with these parishes and what they're coming up against and how they're moving past those things and and just I imagine there's just a lot of metanoia moments in your clients. These just as they're becoming students of their own experience. It's not just all of a sudden moving your parish from being bankrupt to an operating surplus or getting more people in the door. But this is saint-making stuff for the people that are on the team. You are going to have to grow in virtue if you step off on this path, and it's so much better to do it with a Gandalf by your side than going it alone. So,
the thing is, we used to say, like, that phase one outside of pandemic times, we say 2 to 4 years. It took the first time we really went through it. A couple of times I've gone through it. It took 4 years because we didn't really know what we were doing, made a lot of mistakes. Some of the parishes we've worked with, a few of them have moved to the end of phase one after 2 years because they were able to avoid a lot of mistakes. And so we sometimes say, well, why learn from your own mistakes when you can learn from ours? and when we become a community, a connecting community to connect leaders who are doing this, it's like we can learn from one another to hopefully minimize the wasted time and energy.
That's great stuff.
That comes with going on a new journey, a journey to a new place.
Yeah, exactly. Learn from my and there's wisdom, certainly some wisdom in that. Father James, thank you so much for sharing a little bit here today, and just even a little bit of the mindsets that you're encountering in some of these places that are incumbent in these maintenance parishes, and really that metanoia moment, that new mindset, that new culture that you've been sharing about. That really starts to move it into that evangelization, that evangelical missionary-oriented parish. You mentioned a website. Can you give us that website? Is it divinerenovation.org, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, divinerenovation.org. Are you on Instagram, Twitter? You mentioned you've got coffee with Father James. Is there any other media where people can learn a little bit more?
Divine Renovation we've got our different offices have Twitter handles. So you just put in Divine Renovation. We've got Instagram, Facebook. We got all that stuff. My parish is Our Lady of Guadalupe.ca. We have a new beta website up, and we've got a YouTube channel. The coffee videos are on the YouTube channel and on the website as well.
Awesome. Father James, thanks so much. And folks, stick around. We'd love to possibly even have Father James come back here. But thanks for being with us on the Catholic Coaching Podcast. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you again. All right, Father James.
All right.
Thanks for going with me a little bit longer. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, Matt. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
You bet. And Father, you talk about bringing on contract coaches. We're building out our certification program at Metanoia, so it's mindset coaching. But a lot of our coaches, few come and they work for us, but a lot of them are just looking for a place to land. And I can think of some that have really a passion for the consultative work. Some of them that are even one I think of in Ireland that may even desire to learn a little bit more about maybe coming alongside and coaching with you guys.
Yeah, we've over the last couple of years we've been contacted by a lot of folks who are say, well, we'd love to come and get involved, and we say, well, are you in a parish? Are you active? Is your parish in the process? Are you involved? And it's like, no. I go to church, but there's not much happening there. And so it's like, well, find a parish, like get involved, get into the trenches, and then come back and talk to us. Like, so that's where we've kind of really tried to guard that, like we want to be, our coaching team have been our practitioners. That's pretty important that we're from the trenches. So, because it does make a huge difference,
Mm-hmm.
But yes, spread the word, and we do have a pipeline to develop coaches as well. We do have,
Yeah, I imagine it's.
And we're constantly. We're also looking to hire people. I mean, we've got different job postings up right now. Since COVID, we've realized that our employment pool is throughout the world because COVID blew all that apart. So that's what we've done over the last year and a half. We've hired people right across the globe. Staff meetings are interesting. You can hold like 12 different time zones.
Yeah. Gosh, I bet that's a challenge, but fantastic. Awesome. Father, thanks so much.
Thanks, Matt.
Hey, folks, thanks for sticking around and hearing a little bit from Father James Mallon. Learn a little bit more about Divine Renovation Ministries at divinerenovation.org. But to hear more from us, just like and subscribe, and we'll see you again.